Hi, my name is Samantha Adams, and today I'll be talking about the nominal group technique, which is my quality tool that I will be presenting on. And this is for Project Management Course 613, Project Integration and Quality Management. The definition of nominal group technique is a technique that enhances brainstorming with voting process used to rank the most useful ideas for further brainstorming or prioritization. It was originally developed at UW-Madison in 1971, and overall it's a disciplined process. It allows for the collection of input in a way that overcomes the group bias or social influence by others. So it's very organized, very set up in advance, so you have to definitely prepare to use this technique. So throughout this presentation, all of my studies and case studies that I'll be discussing are based in these three papers that I'll have listed right here. The first one is an interesting paper on the analysis of the technique, and it doesn't just look at the nominal group technique in a group setting and if it works or if it doesn't, but it also looks at social loafing, which is a phenomena that they talk about throughout the paper, and that's just basically somebody not helping out at all. So somebody just sitting back and not adding any input and maybe just agreeing with stuff. Social loafing would be that people would not pull a rope as hard if they're in a group as if they were to pull alone. So something like that, where they just rely on other people and say don't add ideas to the group. And this was done by Amos and James at Colorado State and Portland State, respectively. And my next papers were on the studies of just the effectiveness of the technique. The first one was Harvey and Holmes, and they are in Queensland, Australia, and they looked at the helpfulness of the technique in an emergency setting. So they found PhD candidates and nursing staffs at an OBGYN emergency room, and they looked at the most important thing when a woman who is pregnant came into the ER in distress. And surprisingly, the midwives, the nurses, and the PhDs all had different ideas of what was most important. So it was pretty interesting. And then the second one by Kobe at Pennsylvania State University looked at students, and he ran a couple of tests that actually she ran a couple of tests looking at the students, and first she split up students in both of the studies. She split up students, and one of the groups had no instructions but just what they had to do with the project. And the second group had instructions to use the nominal group technique or one of the techniques that they had discussed in their class to organize a project. And then she compared their grades and how well they did on the project, if they turned everything in on time. And so that all those papers will be discussed throughout this presentation. So the applications of this group technique is obviously a group in which there might be bias or influence may come about during the discussion. And in Rose's book, he talked about how the ideas that are under consideration should be 50 ideas or less, just so it's easy to compile them at the end and doesn't take hours to organize the information. If the group is more likely to have higher energy or stronger feelings on the topic, this is a good way to separate them, because it starts as an individual process and then works beyond that. And then we have examples throughout this all these 3 papers that I mentioned last slide. The most interesting one would be the PhDs in the OBGYN ER, and they used it to determine what was most important in their area of the building, to know what they need to focus on more, maybe what they need to buy equipment for, all that stuff. So they gathered everybody and they sat down, and so the process of the nominal group technique is to first have a silent individual generation of ideas. So instead of like brainstorming where you all sit in a group and discuss and come up with ideas that way, this is how the social loafing is eliminated. Everybody is required to generate ideas silently, and then in a round robin of ideas on a flip chart or somewhere you can record everything, they list out all the ideas, and this can be anonymous, so nobody can be afraid to chime in, and ideas will never be drawn back to one individual. And then there's going to be clarification on ideas or solutions, so that means just taking out what is in all the fluff. So everything that is similar goes in one pile, and the different ones, are all prioritized. And then they rank the ideas. Either they prioritize them or they do 1, 2, 3. This one was most said, that one was second most said, that kind of stuff. And then it comes in the brainstorming. You discuss the priorities, and then you have the brainstorming. So this nominal group technique works off of brainstorming, but allows people to come up with their individual own ideas. And so this works in many different applications, whether it's the ER nurses, students learning how to work together in a project, or just a small group of people. We did it at my place of work. We did it for our lean process. We all sat down and wrote down what we thought were the top 5 most important improvements that we need to make within our division, and we all sat down and then wrote that out. We then handed all of our ideas to the person who is running the discussion. She wrote all the ideas down and wrote the top 5 out of all of them. And if there was just one of everything, then we would just write all of them down, and then we would prioritize them ourselves. So there are a few inputs for using this group technique. You first need a group setting. You need the people to attend the group setting, just so you have people to actually work with. You need the meeting room, the place to gather, the supplies like pencils, paper, stuff to write everybody's ideas down on, a place to prioritize all the ideas, and then you need an opening statement. So you need to have a statement that covers what you want to be talking about, and usually the nominal group technique just covers one topic, and that's what the other input is a topic. The outputs of this group technique would be process improvements, project document updates, quality metrics, and organizational process asset updates. And all of these are generated by the ideas and the prioritization. So this is just a great way to lay out everything that needs to be done. Like I said, process improvements in my example in the applications where we use it for our lean process improvements. It was a great way for us to lay out what everyone thought was our big issues and the things that stood out, because even when you're brainstorming, people tend to latch onto one idea and people don't come up with their own ideas. So this is a great way for people not to be pushed into one idea. It allows them to voice their own. So now we're going to look at the advantages of it. It's better than brainstorming alone. As I mentioned last slide, it takes out the need to conform. So overall it's used with brainstorming, but it adds an individual aspect, and it's completely anonymous and removes bias and heated discussions from the conversation. It decreases self-loathing, which I discussed earlier. It is used for prioritization, so there's no influence by outsiders. And there's no pressure to conform, as I mentioned a second ago, and it reduces competition between everybody. Sometimes in brainstorming groups, there's heated discussions, as mentioned above, and that can end up with just two parties arguing. Maybe it creates two sides to the conversation. So there aren't many disadvantages other than it requires preparation, so you have to come to the meeting knowing exactly what you're talking about, or else it's kind of pointless. It removes all group brainstorming in the end until the end, so it minimizes discussion throughout, which is good for the individual aspect and creating unique ideas, but sometimes brainstorming is nice just to, bounce off of each other. But as mentioned in the explanation of how the process works, you do come down to brainstorming in the end. Another disadvantage is that it is time consuming. Everybody has to sit down and think of their ideas, and then you have to prioritize afterwards, and then you have brainstorming. So it can add up to a lot of hours. And it's likely to be a single topic discussion. So if you were planning on having multiple topics, it's going to be, as the other bullet point says, very time consuming. So there are a few alternative tools. You can just do plain brainstorming, which doesn't have the individual aspect. You'll have the group discussion, which is very helpful as well. You can do a histogram, so you can take the list of all the ideas and create a histogram with it, and then you don't even have to have any sort of discussion afterwards. And then I thought force field analysis was a good alternative method from this. Force field analysis is a method of listing, discussing, and evaluating the various forces for and against a proposed change. So as I said in the outputs, there's many changes that can come from this. It can come in the form of process improvements and document change and updating. And so this would be a good opportunity, or this would be a good alternative tool to discuss proposed change, which would be the same idea here. And here are my references, and just to close out, their nominal group technique, there's a lot that can come from it, including I thought the social loafing aspect was the coolest, where you can just remove the people that don't tend to do as much work as the others and create an individual list prior to coming into the brainstorming. I thought this was a great technique. Thank you.